What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, now in this video, I want to talk about Dwight Howard, or more specifically, a segment that was on ESPN First Take today, where it was Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith, and they were debating whether or not Dwight Howard is going to be a Hall of Famer, NBA Hall of Famer, or Basketball Hall of Famer, to be more specific, because the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame is about basketball, not particularly just NBA. And normally I don't agree with Max Kellerman's takes, but this time I would have to agree with him. Max Kellerman said that, Dwight Howard in his eyes will be a Hall of Famer. Stephen A. Smith was more hesitant. He was saying that in his eyes, Dwight Howard is not a Hall of Famer. He pretty much said that a lot of off the court situations and some basketball related, but off the court situations and the shenanigans, I guess, that Dwight Howard has gotten into has disqualified him from being a Hall of Famer. But the thing about it that Stephen A. Smith said that kind of threw me was that he said, well, Dwight Howard is certainly not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Well, this is the thing, though. Okay, there's a lot of guys who are in the Hall of Fame that weren't first ballot. Reggie Miller wasn't first ballot. Reggie Miller didn't get in his first year of eligibility, which kind of surprised some people. In Major League Baseball, Roberto Alomar, I think part of it was the punishment for him spitting on that fan in that playoff game. He wasn't first ballot Hall of Famer, although the stats suggested that he should have been. But as per punishment, to an extent, they made him wait a year. Um, Dennis Rodman was probably the most controversial player of his era. He was. He had gotten to a lot of shit off the court and on the court. I mean, controversial. You look up Dennis Rodman in the dictionary, and it's a picture of him. But he got into the Hall of Fame, but he wasn't first ballot. Matter of fact, I think Dennis got in what 2011, I think it was, and Dennis retired in 2000. So Dennis got in like what his fifth or sixth year of eligibility. So that's not the argument here. The argument isn't whether he's first ballot. The argument is whether he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. And in my estimation, he's a Hall of Famer. Now, I get it. A lot of people don't associate that term with Dwight Howard for whatever their personal reasons are. Okay. But this is the thing. A lot of the criticisms for Dwight Howard isn't because he was a bad player. A lot of the criticisms come from the fact that he never lived up to his expectations. Dwight Howard, I remember vividly 2008, 2009, he was all of the talk in the NBA. And everybody talked about, well, if Dwight just develops a post game, if Dwight develops an ability to, not just be able to score on alley oops and dunks, and if he can actually if he can actually just develop some moves like Shaq, he could be unstoppable. I remember getting into the arguments. I told you this before, man. I got into debates with dudes that were saying shit like Dwight Howard was the perfect blend of Akeem Olajuwon and Wilt Chamberlain, and I remember all of this shit. He was the most athletic center ever. He's going to be the GOAT. I remember like arguing with these guys back then when it was Dwight Howard mania, which seems hard to believe maybe to some young guys when they made that improbable run to the finals, when they beat LeBron James in a Cleveland team that was supposed to be destined to go to the finals. I think they beat them in 5, if I'm not mistaken. I think the one victory was a buzzer beater by LeBron James. And I think LeBron averaged something like 38, 8, and 8 in that series. I mean, he was doing everything possible to try to will his team to a victory over that Orlando Magic team. But Dwight Howard, Michael Pietrix, Jameer Nelson, I believe. Who else is on that team? Rashard Lewis and some others. I can't think of them. Can't remember everybody now. But that team was sort of like almost like a precursor as far as them shooting the three to what we see now. They were like the first team to really, that I can remember, weaponizing the three like that. But In the finals, the Lakers with their interior defense and their length on the perimeter and having Kobe, all right, and Powell finally, toughening up. They beat that team. They neutralized Dwight Howard. They neutralized the 3-point weaponry, and they won a championship. Then, of course, the next year they beat the Boston Celtics in 7. But anyway, going back to Dwight Howard, um, the potential. Dwight Howard had the potential to be a top 20 player. And if he had the drive and the meanness of a Shaq or the drive of a Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or Kobe Bryant, he could have possibly even been a top 10 player. But that's the thing, he could have been that great. But what we did see and what we did get from Dwight Howard was still phenomenal. I'm just going to go through a lot of his career achievements right quick. Dwight Howard was an 8-time All Star. All right, 5 times All NBA first team. One year he was All NBA second team, twice All NBA third team. He's a 3-time NBA Defensive Player of the Year. He won it. He's the only guy to win it 3 years in a row, if my memory serves me correctly. 2009, the year he went to the finals. 2010 and 2011. The only guy to win it 3 years in a row. Of all of the multiple winners of this award, who are all eligible for the Hall of Fame right now, only 2 guys haven't gotten in. And that would be Mark Eaton, who I have a sneaking suspicion is going to get in eventually, and Ben Wallace, who I'm kind of surprised that he didn't get in this year, but Ben Wallace will get in eventually into the Hall of Fame, just because of his exceptional rebounding and defensive ability and shot blocking with those Pistons teams in the 2000s. All right. So that goes to kind of give you a glimpse of what company he's in. Another multiple defensive player of the year winner, 2 other guys I can think of that are in the Hall of Fame are Alonzo Mourning, who could have even been more dominant had he not had to miss some time with that kidney ailment. And then you have Dikembe Mutombo. All right, so he's in the Hall of Fame. 4 times Dwight Howard's an NBA All NBA first team. 1 time All NBA second team. He was on the All NBA rookie first team in 2005, excuse me. In 2008, of course, Dwight Howard put on a sensational show in the NBA Slam Dunk Contest. Uh, Twice, Dwight Howard led the NBA in blocks. Once, Dwight Howard led the NBA in field goal percentage. 5 times, 5 times, Dwight Howard led the NBA in rebounding. All right. uh, if I'm not mistaken, of the only people to lead the NBA in rebounding more seasons than Dwight Howard are Wilt Chamberlain, Dennis Rodman, and Moses Malone. Okay. Um, Out of all the guys who have led the NBA in rebounding in multiple seasons, all right, this means just at least 2 seasons in their career, the only guy not in the Hall of Fame, and the NBA's been around since the 1940s, but the only guys to lead the NBA in rebounding at least twice who are not in the Hall of Fame are Ben Wallace. It's Ben Wallace, excuse me. And like I said before, I think Ben Wallace is going to get in the NBA eventually. We're like in an offensive happy era. And, a lot of these new age guys will look at Ben Wallace and say, oh, he was an unskilled big man, which is absolutely fucking ridiculous because rebounding is a skill. Let me tell you that. Um, I think in pro basketball history, when you look at NBA and ABA, Ben Wallace is, I think, 15th all time in rebounding. And everybody that's ahead of him on the rebounding list, going from Wilt, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Moses Malone, Robert Parrish, all these guys, I think Tim Duncan's ahead of him. I know it's 14 guys, Elijah Wan, all the guys that are ahead of him, Garnett, they're all Hall of Famers. No doubt about it, Hall of Famers. Um, of course, Dwight Howard won Olympic gold in Beijing. And look, when you look at the career accolades, it's there. All right, it's there. I know that Dwight Howard gets a lot of criticism from certain analysts. Shaq is not too fond of him. I understand in the second part of his career, Dwight Howard has become more of a journeyman. You know what I'm saying? Since 2013, he's played with the Lakers. You know, back when he was teaming with Kobe. Kobe notoriously called him soft. He played with the Rockets, the Hawks, the Hornets, the Wizards, and now the Lakers again. Okay, you know, so I get why some people may feel like he's not. But when I look at his achievements and his career rankings and what he's done, I can't help but look at a guy that's a Hall of Famer. I mean, he's also among the all-time leaders in career field goal percentage. And matter of fact, speaking of that, this year he's been playing better than anticipated. Not saying he's a superstar, but for the Lakers, he's averaging about, when you round it off, about 8 points and 8 rebounds per game. But what's interesting is that Dwight Howard is shooting 74% from the floor so far. And if he's able to maintain that, he would break the all-time NBA record for highest field goal percentage in the season, which was set by Wilt Chamberlain, and I believe his last season in the league, the 72-73 season with the Lakers, when he shot 72.7%. One thing I want to note, too, if you would take notice of something, guys, have you noticed that a lot of big men who are really good at catching alley-oops, you know, guys like Dwight Howard, a guy like DeAndre Jordan, several others. Rudy Gobert also has a high field goal percentage. Have you noticed that these guys' field goal percentages are way up? A lot of it has to do with the rule changes. Um, Centers aren't just camped down low all the time. The lanes are much more open. So there's a lot more room for these centers, these big athletic guys, to convert now. You know, there's not the resistance that there once was at the basket. So that's why these guys now, I'm convinced that if Shaq was playing in today's era, Shaq would probably have some seasons shooting 75, 76% from the floor instead of just 58, 59, 60%. Um, so that's pretty much it. I know that Stephen A. Smith has this argument about, well, you know, the first 8 years of Dwight Howard's career was impressive, but the last half hasn't been. Well, look, Bob McAdoo, if you look at the first 6 years of his NBA career, right? The first 6 years, the years he was with the Buffalo Braves, now known as the Los Angeles Clippers, and maybe that first year he was with the Knicks, he looked like he was going to be a top 10 all-time player. But injuries sort of derailed Bob McAdoo's career. He was able to rejuvenate his career as a six man with the Lakers, and but still he wasn't nearly the same guy after the injuries and as he got a little older. You know, when he was with the Celtics and then later on with the Lakers. But there's no doubt about it that Bob McAdoo, when you look at the impact he had when he first came into the league and those 3 years he led the NBA in scoring and that MVP year in 75, plus what he did with North Carolina, he's a Hall of Famer. Matter of fact, let me go to Bob McAdoo right quick, just to kind of show you, illustrate what I'm talking about. Let me go to Bob McAdoo. Love Bob McAdoo too. Um, One of the best jump shooting big men of all time. All right, Bob McAdoo for his career averaged 22.1 points, 9.4 rebounds, and 2.3 assists. Um, all right, that last year, yep, there we go. 77-78 was last year. He was an all-star. I know my shit, man. From 78-79 to the rest of his career, which was to 85-86, Bob McAdoo averaged 15.2 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.7 assists on 49% shooting from the floor and about 72% from the foul line. So those are respectable numbers. You know, they don't really jump out at you. But when you take all that out and you look at Bob McAdoo's first 6 years in the league, all right, then you see a guy who averaged 27.8 points, 12.7 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 1.2 steals, 2.1 blocks, on 51% shooting from the floor. Now that sounds like one of the great players in NBA history. So that's my point. Like, you can't really penalize Dwight Howard for his declining level of play the last couple of years. This guy did have major back surgery. He did have some issue with his butt. I'm not going to go too far into that one. All right. Whatever happened, happened. And another thing too that hurts Dwight Howard. Like I mentioned these things, his personality must seem to his former personality really rubbed a lot of guys the wrong way. Apparently, he could be a prima donna. He could be a bit of a jerk. There are some things about him that rub me the wrong way. I didn't like the fact that you could see him on the Pat Robertson show. He's talking about his his religious belief in his faith. But then you hear the sordid stories about him sleeping with, you know, transgenders. You can't have it both ways. You can't profess to live a life of morality and then live a life of decadence at the same time, having parties with prostitutes and whatever. But look, another thing that hurts Dwight Howard, and I'll say this in closing, is the last half of his career where people talk about how he hasn't played the same way or been as effective. The league kind of changed on him. 10 years ago, a guy like Dwight Howard was heavily coveted. All right, but we have changed from a league that still valued the big man and still had some traditional centers out there to a league where it's now a 3-point revolution. The game has changed. All right. And Dwight Howard was not part of that change. He had to eventually adapt to that change. So, like I said, and this isn't coming from a guy that's a huge Dwight Howard fan, but at the end of the day, if you're saying he's not a Hall of Famer, I don't know. Look, people got their own opinions. I don't see how he's not a Hall of Famer. Now, is he first ballot? I wouldn't necessarily say so. If it's an exceptionally weak draft, then he might become first ballot. But I wouldn't have a problem if he doesn't get in the first or second year. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I do think he should get in eventually, third year or so. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. But tell me what you guys think.